Hey, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. This is now our 6th video in this module number 5, exploring the topic of management. One of the things that managers do, of course, is to make plans and decisions. That's one of the primary functions of management. And so in this particular lecture, as you can see from this title slide, we deal with the topic of goals and strategy. Goals and strategy. I think most of us are familiar with the term goals, setting goals for ourselves, setting our goals for others, and of course in this particular context, setting goals for entire organizations. But what exactly is strategy, and why is that part of goal setting? Let's take a look at that. So really, at the most basic top level, what we're talking about are trying to answer two questions on behalf of an organization. Goals help us to establish where are we going? And of course, you know the old adage, right? If you don't have a destination, well, then any road will take you there, right? So what setting goals attempts to do is to answer that question, exactly where are we trying to go? Strategy then answers the second question. Once you've established where you want to go, well, how are we going to get there? And of course, the nuances of how are we going to get there include how are we going to get there based upon the environment we're in, the organization we've got, and the level and types and quality of resources we have at our disposal. All those things together, how are we going to get where we want to go? So that hopefully provide a little bit of a context for us to understand how goals and strategy are different and how goals and strategy are related and support one another. When we talk about setting business goals, well, you can see the description there. What are business goals? What a business hopes and plans to achieve and accomplish. Those kinds of goals are driven by the basic mission and purpose of the organization. And it's how every organization and every organization's managers eventually measure whether or not they are successful or failures at every single level. Has a particular project been a success? Has a particular product or service in the marketplace proven to be a success? All of that is determined by the goals you set. Now, you see the second bullet point, that your business goals are driven by your mission and your purpose. That's not just a Pollyannish statement, a vague wish. It really is very specifically the goals that you create as an organization will be driven by your stated mission. And typically an organization's mission can be found where? In their mission statement. Here's an example. Google, like most large organizations, have an explicit written mission statement. And in this particular case, you see there the example. Google's corporate mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Do you believe that Google has accomplished that? I do, personally. When I look at the great parade of different organizations and how well or how poorly they've actually been able to execute on their mission statement, in Google's case, I think they've done a bang-up job. They've done a stellar job of organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. In fact, it's gotten to the point now that when we talk about internet search, we use the term Google, right? Google has become the verb, how we actually describe these kinds of things, right? We're going to Google them, and that is no small accomplishment. Does this mean that Google's execution is perfect and can't be improved? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It does mean, though, they've done a pretty darn good job so far of organizing the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. And if you work at Google, this mission statement will help you, it'll help inform whether or not the goals that your business unit wants to set are in step and in sync with the larger corporate mission of the organization, or whether it's really not related or maybe even runs counter to this particular mission statement, right? So the mission statement starts as your first guide to help you establish business goals. What are the purposes of setting business goals? Well, you see 4 of them here, and this is not comprehensive, right? This is just examples, right? Setting your business goals provides direction and guidance for managers at all levels. It helps to make sure that everyone is rowing in the same direction, especially if you publish and then educate and communicate to all managers and employees what is the stated explicit goal that you're all trying to row towards. Secondly, it helps firm allocate resources, right? Because if you know where you're trying to get to, then you realize, well, okay, as we start to develop the how, what resources do we have to have allocated to this particular set of goals? In addition, at a much larger level, setting your goals helps to define your corporate culture. We'll talk about corporate culture a little more in a couple of slides, but the point here is simply this. Your culture of your organization, your corporate culture, can be at least, one of the most powerful tools you have to create excellent performance, to have extraordinary performance in the marketplace, to have employees that are engaged and excited and thriving at your workplace. All those things can be true, and setting your goals helps to define the corporate culture. And finally, at least on this slide, setting your goals helps managers to assess their own performance, and for you, quite frankly, to help to assess other managers' performance. How well have they performed in getting their business units to accomplish their role in accomplishing goals? Those are just 4 of the main primary things that goal setting provides to an organization. So you can sort of see why it's so important. Now, there are several different types of goals, and this is really a hierarchy, right? And so you see at the very top, the mission statement, what is the very purpose of our organization within our environment, and how will we accomplish it? How will we achieve it? From there flow long-term goals, right? If this is the big mission, the purpose of our entire organization, well, when we talk about long-term, typically 5 or more years, what are some of the goals that we would set in order to accomplish that purpose? So you can see that sort of we're breaking the mission statement down into long-term, big, huge, audacious goals. And from there, once you have long-term goals, you can break those down into intermediate goals, right? If you have like a 9 or a 10-year goal, you can break those up into 2 to 3 year goals. Every 2 to 3 years, this is how we're going to measure our progress towards a long-term goal. You set intermediate goals, and finally, intermediate goals lead to short-term goals, goals set for the very near future. If you have a great big multi-year project, how will you measure making progress in the next several months, and then the next set of months, and then the next quarter, and the next quarter, etc., etc. And this is typically how organizations will create a hierarchy of goals. You'll notice here, of course, this hierarchy actually aligns and correlates with different levels of managers. Remember in a previous lecture we talked about different levels of managers in terms of level of responsibility. And as you might guess, top managers are typically responsible for and accountable for accomplishing long-term goals. Mid-level managers are responsible and accountable for accomplishing intermediate goals. And of course, frontline managers are the ones who are dealing with short-term goals every single day of the week. Hope that makes sense. But let's keep going. Once we talk about goals, now you know where you are going. And the next question, of course, is how are we going to get there? And that is where we turn our attention now to the next topic, the topic of strategy. Strategy can be defined, as you see here on the slide, as the broad set of organizational plans for implementing the decisions made for achieving organizational goals. So, since goals have established where we want to go, strategy sets plans for how we're going to get there. Therefore, strategic management is referred to as the process of helping an organization maintain an effective alignment with its environment. That sounds like a word salad, doesn't it? I mean, that's textbook speak. But what we're really talking about is strategy, your planning, the process doesn't exist in a vacuum. Strategic management then takes this broad set of organizational plans, holds it up to the bright, raw reality of who you are as an organization within your environmental context. And then make sure that you are still moving toward accomplishing your strategic plans in the environment you actually have. Let me just give you a brief example of strategic management, right? So think about a product like Netflix, right? That's a service that provides streaming video nowadays, right? Now, Netflix wasn't always that, but it is now. Now what Netflix really represents is a way for people leveraging the internet to stream video for entertainment. Well, can you imagine a world where Netflix tries to become a company before there's such a thing as an internet? Competing with broadcast television? No, I can't either, because that doesn't align with the actual environment that a company like that would exist in at that point in time. It's only because of the environment that this particular execution of delivering entertainment to customers and consumers actually works. That is, strategic management maintaining effective alignment with its environment. Why do I bring this up? Because quite frankly, some of us in listening to this lecture are old enough to remember when Netflix wasn't necessarily about primarily streaming video. In fact, what Netflix used to be primarily about was mailing DVDs out to people back when that was the primary way that people watched movies. Some of you may remember that. Some of you may have started out with Netflix that way, with the subscription basis where they would send you 5 DVDs, and then as you returned it in the little self-addressed mailer, they would mail you another one off your list, and then you got to watch movies like that on a subscription basis. Again, it's the same basic strategy, which is delivering entertainment on demand to subscribing consumers, but it's done in a different way because it was maintaining effective alignment with its current environment. I hope that makes sense. And for some of you who never knew that Netflix used to ship out DVDs, well, you're too young for me. Get off my lawn, darn kids. All right, next slide. So, when we talk about strategy, we are borrowing this figure 5.3 from chapter 5 of your textbook, right, to illustrate the fact that there are different levels of strategy. Just as there are different levels of goals and different levels of planning, there are different levels of strategy. You see the big, huge green box of corporate strategy, and within that, there is business or competitive strategy, and within that, there's functional strategy. So let's look at these one at a time. When we talk about corporate strategy refers to the big picture, strategy for determining the firm's overall attitude towards growth and the way it will manage its businesses or product lines. How does the big picture fit together based upon the entire large piece of environment that we're dealing with? The marketplace, the current times, the technology we have at our disposal, all those kinds of things. Who are we as a corporate entity, as an organization? And how are we moving forward? So that's the idea behind corporate strategy, especially in, for instance, an organization that has multiple product lines, multiple business lines, right? Someone will be in charge of looking at the entire big picture. Now that, of course, is slightly different than business or competitive strategy, which, as you can see here, the definition from the textbook, strategy at the business unit or product line level, focusing on improving a firm's competitive position. And you see really what we're talking about is competitive level strategy based upon one particular business unit or one particular product line. And then this too is also different than functional strategy, the strategy by which managers in specific areas decide how best to achieve corporate goals through increased productivity. And you understand what this is about is at the functional level, how do I make sure that I have the most effective, efficient sales department? How do I make sure the operations is delivering the highest quality possible product at the lowest possible unit cost? How do I make sure that I excel within my functional area to deliver those kinds of things on behalf of the larger mission of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, I hope that this helps to give a framework, a mental framework for how goals and strategy fit together, how they complement one another while they are significantly different things, right? Goals answers the question, once you've set them, where do we want to go? And strategy and planning, given the circumstances and environment we've got, how are we going to get where we want to go? How are we going to do that? And then you see how these component parts break into little pieces, into component pieces. So if this gives you a better understanding of how these great big concepts fit together, in the next lecture, we can start to talk about how does one go about formulating strategy? How does one actually go about, what are the steps involved? More on that in the next lecture. Of course, more on this topic, goals and strategy and how it fit together, right? More of that in the textbook. So I hope that you'll review that, and I hope this video was helpful for you. We'll see you in the next lecture.